Dobry den, and first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. There's a little bit of feedback, I think. Yeah, that's okay. I'll just move this a little. That's okay. It's just that's up to you. Yeah, maybe a little further away. When I think about it, as some of you probably know, I've performed with this choir and other choirs many, many times, but I can't even recall the last time I had an opportunity to speak about an aspect of the choir since I've been conducting choirs. So I'm going to take the opportunity to do that, and I think when Larissa asked me to talk about the tour, I thought it was important to give you a little bit of background about the choir, because I know there are people here who've lived in Edmonton many years, but there are also people who may not know much about the choir. So I'm going to start about the history of the choir. It started as the Ukrainian Male Chorus of Edmonton. We're still working on a name, and we have been since our founding in 1984. But we've settled on it because it tells people everything about it. Ukrainian, male, and chorus, and the fact that we're from Edmonton. So in 1984, I was approached by a number of young men, my friends and acquaintances that were my age, and they wanted to form a choir. And in order to tell you why, I thought I'd give you an idea of the state of choirs in Edmonton at that time. There were two main adult choirs. There was Dnipro and Verkhovena, and they were the two mixed secular adult choirs. And there was also another choir that's going to play an important role, and that is the Edmonton Sunk Choir. It's based on the Ukrainian Orthodox youth organization Sunk, Союз Української молоді Канади. Now that particular choir was formed in 1965. To me, it was a real seminal decision by members of St. John's Cathedral. Two of them I know were involved in that, Dr. Leo Farena and Mr. Otto Yeronyuk. And that choir was formed in 1965, and it peaked sort of in the late 1970s, and at that time it had a membership of about 65 singers that were from ages 14 to 25. Now, if I go back a little bit, the Dnipro choir was formed in 1953 as a male chorus, and it became a mixed choir in 1971. So, since the year 1971, there was no real Ukrainian male chorus in Edmonton. There was a group called Kashtane, and it was a small male ensemble of about 8 to 10 men, but they sang mostly kind of cabaret-style upbeat songs. They performed small little numbers, but they didn't even have any, I don't think, plans to form a male choir. But the Ukrainian male chorus, in its beginnings, was actually made up mostly of former Sunk choir singers that were kind of too old for Sunk choir, but fell in love with choral singing, and were good at it, and fell in love with Ukrainian choral music. So the idea came about in 1984 to form this choir. It started with about 12 members, and to this day we have about 40 members. And I've conducted the choir since its beginnings, and I took a break around 2004 for about 5 years. And we've sung in festivals, Vegreville, Dauphin, every major city in Canada, liturgies in countless churches, wedding services, concerts for many, many occasions in the Edmonton area, and we even sang for Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma when he came to Edmonton. Now, we also take pride in being asked to perform with many non-Ukrainian groups. As an example, we've sung with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra probably 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 times in the past 6 or 7 or 8 years. One of the highlights for me is the fact that we commission new pieces. Back in 1991, we commissioned a piece called Той старий кожух, the sheepskin coat, that was in concert with the 100th anniversary of the immigration of Ukrainians to Canada in 1991. And we also commissioned a song about Chernobyl. We found a poem online written by a 14-year-old boy from Ukraine, and he wrote this poem, I think it was as a school assignment about Chernobyl. So we contacted him and asked him for the rights to create a song about the Chernobyl, and Willie Zvozdetsky from Vancouver, Gene Zvozdetsky's younger brother, wrote that. And we also got Willie Zvozdetsky to write a song about borscht. So this is a 6-minute song that goes through the recipe of making borscht, and it's written in the style of a male chorus church liturgical chant. And lately we also commissioned a medley of 3 of the best-known songs by Mickey and Bunny, who were instrumental in the Ukrainian-Canadian experience back in the 1960s and 70s. So for me, singing Ukrainian choral music is important to celebrate what many composers have written, but it's also important for us to continue and develop Ukrainian choral music and based on contemporary Ukrainian topics and also Ukrainian-Canadian ideas as well. Prior to this trip, our choir had a number of trips. We toured Australia at the time that I wasn't with them, but the first time that we toured was in 2001. We went to Poland and Ukraine. In Poland, we joined forces with another well-known Ukrainian male chorus in Poland, and they are called Żurawli, and they're made up of singers born in Poland, but in the diaspora, kind of like us. They had many similarities, but a few differences, because one of the differences that I remember is that one of our choristers brought a football, and none of them knew how to throw a football. Why would they? Because they're in Poland. They don't play football. So they learned how to play football. A little bit of a Canadian cultural experience with them. Most of these guys lived all over Poland because it was a result of Akcja Wisła by the Polish government. So they had small little communities, and for them to get together was kind of more on a workshop experience. Once a month they would get together. They traveled the 100 or 200, 300 kilometers to get together. We sang in 3 towns in Poland with Żurawli. We traveled to Ukraine by ourselves, the first time that we went to Ukraine. And one highlight of that trip was singing in a village called Hrycewolia, where one of our choristers was born. We took a Polish bus from Poland to Ukraine, and I remember distinctly we drove down this country road that had been freshly graded for us because the roads in Ukraine, well, they have everybody knows about the condition of many of the roads. And we're traveling by the bus, and people are waving to us in the fields. And ladies and girls are walking to the concert arm in arm, so our bus would stop and pick them up. It was a real kind of pastoral sort of scene. We got to the theater. It was the size of a high school theater, packed with people. Before we got to the theater, we were greeted with korovai, with bread and salt. We wanted a keyboard for our concert, but I was told, no, rec wział na wesilla, so we didn't have a keyboard. Didn't matter, we improvised. After about 10-15 minutes, we were soaked because it was so humid, but the warmth of the people is something that I will remember to this very day. And another thing that I'll remember is when we were looking into the audience, somebody was waving a big flag of the province of Saskatchewan. Something we would never have expected in Hrycewolia. But this chorister's wife is from Saskatchewan, so somehow they got a flag from Saskatchewan, and they showed their sort of friendliness by waving something that we would recognize. Later on, because the theater was so packed, some people weren't able to be inside the theater, so we had to do another set of songs outside because there were so many people that weren't able to fit. And that particular experience was a real catalyst for our choir because we had sung throughout Edmonton and the area for many years, but that really got us thinking about what we do in Canada, profoundly affecting people who were in Ukraine. And in a way, many people said that we were bringing our Ukrainian musical culture back to them. Because this was in 2001. We also sang in Lemkivska Watra in southern Poland, and it was an instrumental experience because we got there really late. Our bus got stuck in the mud. The wheels were entirely in mud, and we had to find somebody to pull our bus out. And we happened to find a Ukrainian bus driver who had a 1953 bus, and he tied a cable to this Polish bus, so the Ukrainian bus rescued this Polish bus out of the mud. I thought that was kind of a memorable thing. We returned to Poland and Ukraine in 2011, and on that particular trip we had the experience of singing at St. George's Cathedral in Lviv, which was memorable for many of us because this is a legendary cathedral, Ukrainian Catholic cathedral in Lviv. We sang in Chepinci, through Bukovina, and we even got to the Sorochinsky market, Yarmorok, in the city of Poltava. In 2014, we traveled to Latvia. We took part in the World Choir Games. There we competed in 3 categories, And then after a week there, we traveled back to Poland to sing for 2 Ukrainian communities in Wrocław and Olsztyn. And after that, we concluded our tour singing at St. Barbara's Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral in the city of Vienna. And after that particular church service, people didn't want to let us go, so we found some steps in some little courtyard in Vienna, and we stood on the steps and sang a bunch of songs for them. And people from Vienna were looking out their windows, seeing a choir sing. It was quite magical. So just a number of experiences that our choir has experienced that give us incentive to keep going. Our choir is really an amateur choir. We have a wide range of ability, and it's the type of choir where many people who have joined the choir first learned how to sing in a choir with us or with other choirs. Because predominantly in Edmonton, in Ukrainian choirs, most people who sing in choirs learned how to sing in a choir by taking part in the choir. It's a little bit challenging for us sometimes to find audiences that will appreciate our choral music because, of course, language is a barrier, and choral music isn't necessarily popular all the time in Edmonton or throughout Canada. And much of our Ukrainian choral music is written in the last half of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th centuries, because during the Soviet period, there was a limited amount of quality, interesting choral music written. Some was, but in my experience, not very much. So when we organize tours, we always think about where are we going to perform so that people will appreciate what we have to offer. Because if we sing our music for just predominantly non-Ukrainian audiences, well, there are hundreds of thousands of choirs throughout the world that can do that. And yes, our Ukrainian choral music has its own beauty and charm, but language seems to be a barrier for audiences. So we always have to keep that in mind. So after a bit of research, we learned that there were actually many Ukrainians living in Spain and Portugal. So we thought, why not go there? It's a great destination anyway, as many of you would know. So we had our president, Bill Lebedovich, and his friend Elena. They traveled throughout Spain and Portugal. They found places where we could sing. They made contacts through churches with the help of Bishop Ilarion in Edmonton, who actually used to live in Portugal. And because they were able to go through those places, they did it as part of their holiday. That helped us tremendously in being able to consider where good, suitable places to sing would be. We set it up so each chorister was responsible for their flights, but we all had to meet in the city of Barcelona on Saturday, July the 8th. That evening, we rehearsed the liturgy, because next morning, we were singing in a church, and that's when I'm going to now go to our slideshow. Oh, that's me. So this is the iconostas in this particular church, but you could see on the top, it's not originally a Ukrainian church. So the Ukrainian community either leased or is using this church, so obviously they have installed an iconostas. So we sang the liturgy there, and we sang our responses to the petitions on the side. And after that, we moved the tetrapod out of the way, and we just sang in front of the iconostas and presented a concert. And everybody stayed after the liturgy. One lady said, as long as you're singing, we're staying. So it was just a tremendous amount of appreciation for us. Not only because we're singing in the language that they all understand, but we're from Canada. So it's a little bit exotic to have a choir from Canada and yet a male choir to sing, because there's not a lot of male choral singing generally anywhere. So to have a choir that sings in their language from Canada and a male choir that's got its own kind of sound, it was very well received. Now, I should also say that often, as in previous tours, people from Ukraine are often surprised that we sing Ukrainian choral music from Canada. And I expressed, or they often expressed, that, as I mentioned, in Canada, we've been sort of safeguarding, in a way, Ukrainian culture and music for the day that music will have been, or that will be permitted in Ukraine. And many are also surprised that many of us, after 2 or 3 generations, can still have a conversation in Ukrainian, or at least certainly read in Ukrainian and sing in Ukrainian. So I come across that a lot. And this is a street scene here on Las Ramblas. So there's a number of our choristers, and these are all people who either are working in Spain or have lived in Spain for a number of years, a variety of people. So just a small street scene. But in the congregation, there were probably about 150 or 200 people. Then, after Barcelona, we traveled to a resort called Lloret de Mar. And there was a choral festival and a competition, a small scale, but mostly youth choirs from China and South Africa. So this is us performing in the competition. So you can see our headline up over there. And at the end of the competition, we had an outdoor kind of closing concert. So this is prior to the concert. And this is part of our combined choir at the concert. There was one song that we had to learn, and all of the choirs learned this particular song. That's just us singing at this event. As a part of our stay in Lloret de Mar, we went to the monastery of Montserrat. This is high up in the mountains in northern Spain, about an hour from Barcelona, and the bus keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up. I'm not really prepared to give you a lot of information about this monastery, but you can look it up. It's very historic and very, very beautiful. And this is us in one of the courtyards. And this is us singing in the big cathedral in Montserrat. So each choir had the opportunity to sing for about 10 minutes. So this is us in front of the altar in this historic church. And those of you who have been in Barcelona, you will be familiar with the Sagrada Familia Cathedral. A number of us took a tour there. This is Sorry about that. There we go. This is an indoor shot of Sagrada Familia. Again, you can look it up on the internet. It's a very interesting church. Then we eventually made it to Madrid, and we sang in a Greek Orthodox church. But when you walk into the church, it's very familiar to us. Now, this was an extremely hot day. Not a cloud in the sky, not a 1 kilometer breeze. But this, again, was an emotional experience for many of the people who were in the church. Because, again, a choir comes from Canada, it's a male choir, and we sing the entire liturgy. So the same liturgy that we sing in Edmonton or Toronto or New York, the same liturgy there. So that sort of process of going through the liturgy was a real kind of a uniting experience through that singing. And it was so hot in there that some of our singers, about 15 minutes or 20 minutes in, their glasses were fogging up, so they couldn't even read the music. It was so humid. But you just keep going, because you see I'll be just a second. You see the people and how respectfully they treat the whole church service. You just keep going and you just keep singing it, and it just gives you such a feeling that this is a really worthwhile experience, that there's nothing else that we should be doing at the time, just singing, for people who really appreciate the choral singing that we did in the liturgy. After that, of course, typical Ukrainian experience, tables that are overflowing with food and fruit and even a little bit of kvass and juice and so on. So this was in the courtyard, and then we sang in the courtyard. There's me with the korovai that was presented to us, a bishop in the rushnek, and korovai with leaves on it made of dough. Just absolutely beautiful. It's hard to bring it back home, but you can see the work and the respect that that community has just in the presentation and then the preparation and the thinking that it's important to present these people, us choristers, with the korovai. That's a better shot of it. So you can see how much work is involved in that. And blue and yellow strichki, the ribbons, and the Veshevny Rushnik. So this is us singing in the courtyard, and there's the priest. He had no qualms about joining us. So by all means, of course, he didn't know any of the words, but he was just so over the top appreciative of our efforts. He couldn't stop saying as many positive things as he could about what we were doing and the songs that we sang. And there's a shot of the congregation. You can see how people dressed for the occasion because the boys from Canada were coming. This is a group shot. Now, what's interesting about this is that this gentleman and a group of his friends are collecting funds to make a monument for Ivan Franko in Madrid. So they want to create a statue for Ivan Franko. So that's the poster of that, and they're fundraising for that. And this is a town on the way. We didn't sing there, but it just gives you an idea of what you see in Spain. So this is the city of Salamanca. And I think one of the, if not the oldest universities in Spain.
They're celebrating 800th anniversary next year.
Oh, okay. There you go. Then we ended up in Portugal, and in a city of Porto, which is, I think, the second largest city in Portugal. It was midweek, so we didn't sing a liturgy there, but we sang a small concert in the evening. Not a lot of people were able to come to the concert, but because people work, and many people work at night. But we still had a warm reception after the concert. And this particular lady, she sang many songs by herself too. She not shy at all, but she took the opportunity for her and a group of other people to create a concert where they sang and we sang together. Again, celebrating music. They living in Spain, we in Canada, but through Ukrainian music, there's a common language, a common understanding. And that's the reception after. And then, of course, you have to have a group picture. So that is the group picture. So we're in the back, and these are many of the people who are there. Did I miss a slide? Oh, no. Yeah, there we go. So, of course, after the reception, we had two bayanistas, so we brought a bayan because we knew that it would come in handy not only in our performances, but because you can't always rely on a piano or a keyboard, but a bayan is always available. So not only did we use the bayan for our performances, but also for parties after. Then, this is in Lisbon. We sang in, it's a Ukrainian Orthodox church, but it's actually a Roman Catholic church, as you can see by the architecture. But it seems that they set up an iconostas for the particular Sunday, and they just use it as a church. So this is the priest there talking about the architecture in that church. And this was in downtown Lisbon. And there's the priest talking to us after. And again, many of you will recognize tables that are there's just no room for any other dishes. This is not catered. This is people bring their own food because it's important to do that because we have guests from Canada. And I should also mention that this is the first time after a liturgy that a priest came up to me and asked me if I wanted any samahonka, the moonshine. So, it's just that's the way it is, right? And then after that, of course, food and drink, and we sang and had party time with them for another 2 or 3 hours. And this is our last stop on our tour. And that's another shot. We got another bayanist here, and everybody's singing. And many of the songs they knew and we knew, but many of our male choristers unfortunately don't know many of the songs that people like me were brought up with. So that sort of limited the experience for some of our guys, but some of our guys did know the songs. And that's a picture of us, a formal picture at Edmonton City Hall. And I can just let you know that the tour was very successful, memorable, and this time, in contrast to other tours, we had a little bit more time to do sightseeing, which is something that was harder to do in previous tours, because the distances, even though we're used to distances in Edmonton, like for us to drive to Saskatoon, whoopie ding, right? But still, they're far, and for us to sit on a bus for a long time, it's kind of hard to do. So this particular tour was a little bit easier that way. So that brings an end to my presentation about the tour and a little bit of history about our choir, and I would be happy to entertain any questions that you may have about this tour, any other tour, or about any aspect of our choir. Thank you, Larissa.
So, you mentioned that you competed, and I'm curious, when you go into a choir competition where your repertoire is primarily Ukrainian, were you given a generic score, like that all the choirs sang that for competition purposes that you would be evaluated, or how did that work?
This particular competition was a lower scale competition, but I think a better illustration would be the World Choir Games that we sang in Latvia. This is the biggest World Choir Festival / competition in the world. It happens every year or every 2 years. We stayed there for a week. We were in 3 categories, and the categories are things like male chamber choir, 0 to 24 members, or folklore choir, or sacred choir. So what we do is we pick the categories where we think that we have the best chance in competing, but also where it makes the most sense for us. We were in 3 categories in Riga. In retrospect, that was too many, because then we were too busy traveling from one place to another to compete, because that festival is so big that at any given time there are 4 or 5 venues where choirs are singing. Yeah, in the city of Riga. So, but we didn't have a competition piece that we had to learn, but we had a booklet of songs that all of the choirs were required to learn, and we rehearsed with all the other choirs, and at the very end, we had the massed choir of probably, I would say, 700 singers, with the Latvian State Symphony Orchestra, televised live on Latvian television. This would never happen in Canada. But this is it gives you a flavor for the importance of choral music. And if you read about the importance of choral music, Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia, especially Lithuania and Estonia, how important choral music was in their particular history, especially during Soviet times, and prior to that, it's quite neat. So you have a 80-piece orchestra, and you're singing in this. It was all a variety of things. We even did a medley of ABBA tunes, right? But South Africa, China, Korea, people from all over the world singing together. And I should also mention that we are from Canada, except we sort of, in a way, represent Ukraine. So for some of those people, they don't know, are you singing as a choir from Ukraine or are you singing from Canada? So we can tell the story of how important Ukrainian music is for us, and a little bit about the story of Canada, about the multicultural aspect of Canada, and also that, we love Ukrainian choral music, so we focus on Ukrainian choral music, so in a way we represent Ukraine. Yeah.
I'm wondering, people who sing in your choir, what's in it for them? Why do they do it? What's their motivation? And also, whether you get any interest from younger boys who would like to join the choir. Is it still the same team that started many years ago?
There's 2 particular questions. What's in it for these men? Well, there's camaraderie for sure. When you belong to a club, whether it's a curling group or an embroidery group or a choir, there's that aspect. Also the aspect of working together for a common goal. Because in sports often there's competition. There is no competition in a choir, other than with other choirs. But for the most part, this all depends on teamwork. because we all have to work together to sound as well as we can. The men that sing in the choir come from a variety of experiences, a variety of Ukrainian experiences. We have 3 or 4 gentlemen that are from Ukraine, 1 from Poland. The rest of these guys are or 2 from Poland. The rest of them are all from Canada. And some first generation, like me, some second generation, some even third generation, and some even, we have one gentleman that joined, he's of mixed Ukrainian background, but he can't read Cyrillic, so I have to transliterate some of our music for him, and I'm happy to do that. Your second question is extremely important because it opens up the aspect of the interest of what we do for people who are in their 20s and 30s. Many of us, as I mentioned, were fortunate enough to have had a positive experience singing in this youth choir. And what helped the boys come to the youth choir is there were girls, sopranos and altos. So, and I'm quite serious actually about this, because to encourage young men to spend a Tuesday evening with a bunch of other men, many of whom are gray or past gray, is a hard sell. And then to try to convince them to sing choral music, and as you know, unfortunately in Canada we don't have much of a choral music tradition, and often in elementary schools singing tends to be, it's still maintained, but sometimes it seems to be on the chopping block. And then to sing in a language that's becoming more and more and more foreign to many people, it's a challenge. So part of what I need to do is make what we do as relevant as possible for a typical second or third or fourth generation young man in his 20s or 30s. Because we can continue to sing music that was written in the late 19th century, and there's lots of beautiful choral music. But it's, you just can't always sing about Marusia and Ivan, or just songs written to the music written to the text of Taras Shevchenko or Lesya Ukrainka or Ivan Franko. It's less and less relevant to them. So for me, I take a lot of pride. Like I mentioned before, we have a song about borscht. It talks about the Ukrainian experience. It's sung in English, but it's all about church. It's all about deciding whether or not you're supposed to put sour cream into borscht. All right, and there's a part in the song about that. And also about Chernobyl. This is, and also something about Chernobyl when we sing in Ukrainian, when you tell non-Ukrainian audiences, this is what we're singing about, and I set it up, that this was written by a 14-year-old boy from Ukraine who was part of that experience as close as possible. People don't need to understand the words if I tell them a little bit about the song. So, but it's tough. It's hard. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to take the opportunity to make 2 announcements. Every December, our choir has a Christmas concert called A Festive Mosaic. And I invite you all to consider going to that. It's the first Saturday of December, December the 2nd. It's in McDougall United Church, a beautiful acoustic, and a great place to sing because it's got a nice stage. And every year we invite a different choir and a different instrumental group. So we've got the Eco Singers and we've got the Mill Creek Colliery Band. With Mill Creek Colliery Band, we sang with them back in April, and the reason I highlight that is because one of the pieces we sang was a song called Hey Zletilis Orle that we had arranged for brass bands. So our men's choir were singing our Ukrainian music, and a 24-piece brass band was playing a Ukrainian piece of music on their flugelhorns and tubas and trombones and all that. Things like that to me are memorable because it shows that our Ukrainian music can be respected and can be enjoyed in and of itself by people who aren't just Ukrainian. But you have to set it up that way. The second thing that we're doing is on February the 10th, we're having a dinner dance called My Ukrainian Valentine. So we're going to be singing Ukrainian love songs. And also we've got a dinner and we've got a dance band. But to make it a little bit more romantic, we've got the Don Berner band, and they are playing big band type of music. So if you're ready to cha-cha and foxtrot and tango, then you're more than invited to do that. That's at St. Basil's, just down 109th Street, St. Basil's Cultural Center. So those are two events that are happening in the near future for our choir.
Speaking about acoustics, you got a chance to sing in such beautiful churches in Spain and Portugal. Was there one most memorable, I don't know, most special for you? Acoustic?
Well, in the church, the first church in Barcelona, it was a wide open space, so that helps for sure. In the church in Madrid that was more closed in and darker and very humid, it wasn't much of an acoustic because there isn't really a choir. And I remember conducting, there was a big column in front of me, so I had to sort of a little bit conduct a little bit like this. But that's okay because lots of the guys don't look at me anyway, so it didn't make much of a difference because this is the conductor, he's just doing what he needs to do. And in the last church, we sang in a choir loft, so that also was a good acoustic. But as you know, these churches were built, the acoustics were very, very important, right? There's no microphones or anything at that time, and it had to be a spiritually beautiful experience, and part of that experience, not only the architecture and the iconography, but also the acoustic. It had to make sense. It had to be appropriate.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your interest. And again, I honestly thank you very much, Larissa, for giving me the opportunity to talk with the choir. As I mentioned before, and I mean that, it's been since 1984 that I've been conducting not only this choir, but other choirs as well. So over 30 years has transpired, and first opportunity for me to talk, and from the heart, I think, about what the Ukrainian choirs that I'm involved in, especially this Ukrainian male chorus, what we do and what we have done. So thank you so very much. And thank you for your attention.